First, I would like to thank Raju for leading all of us. You have inspired so many of us with your leadership in driving transformational change, and we are so grateful that you are now leading this very important program. The Knight-Bagehot Fellowship Program was one of the first major investments of the Knight Foundation, which was started by two brothers who owned newspapers in 26 cities across the country. Today, we make major investments in the people and projects who champion the First Amendment and who are promoting a future for journalism. Earlier this year, our Board of Trustees doubled Knight's investment to $300 million over the next 5 years to help build a future for local news. And for anyone who has ever had to persuade their board or their CEO to make such a major investment, you need really good data, you need really good research. We have all been very fortunate in the news industry to rely on incredible research over the last several years that has been led by a Knight chair at the University of North Carolina. And because of this extraordinary research that has documented the decline of local newspapers in cities and towns across the country, this unparalleled effort is what has enabled us in philanthropy to identify where are the critical gaps and also where are the opportunities for us to embrace new models, new methods, and to accelerate the transformation of those legacy newsrooms that are committed to their communities. And so I was so delighted to learn that the very important award, the very important Christopher Wells Award, is being made to Professor Penny Abernathy at the University of North Carolina. The Knight-Bagehot Advisory Board chose Penny, gave her this honor because her research has done an incredible job raising the alarm and prompting an industry-wide call to action about the local news crisis. Please join me in welcoming Penny Abernathy, a trailblazer, a 1985 graduate of the Knight-Bagehot Fellowship Program, who has spent 30 years, more than 30 years, as a reporter, a journalist, a news media executive at the Wall Street Journal, at the New York Times, and we are so grateful that Penny has been turning her attention to addressing and helping us all understand that the state and fate of our democracy is at risk. Thank you. Penny.
Thank you, Jennifer, for the Knight Foundation's longstanding support for the Knight-Bagehot program, and especially for my work as Knight Chair at UNC. Thank you, Raju, and the Knight-Bagehot program for this honor. It's especially humbling, given the meritorious business journalism produced by my Knight-Bagehot colleagues every day, as you just saw. Most of all, heartfelt thanks for Chris Wells. 30 years ago, I was an assistant Metro editor at the Dallas Times-Herald, so there must have been something about the women at the Dallas Times-Herald back then. I had very limited business journalism experience, but Chris accepted me into the program even though he knew I nurtured ambitions of switching sides and becoming a newspaper publisher. His mentorship guided me through Columbia, and it has informed the business decisions I later made at the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and Harvard Business Review. So for me, this is the equivalent of winning a Pulitzer, and I'm sure he is pleased, or would be, that after 2 decades of taking very circuitous detours through the business side, I have finally made it to being a business journalist, documenting and reporting on the state of the news industry at a very pivotal moment in our history. Over the past 15 years, we've lost 1/4, or 2,100 local newspapers in this country, leaving hundreds of communities, inner city neighborhoods, suburban towns, and rural counties without a reliable source of local news and information. Compounding the problem, over the past 10 years, we've lost more than half the journalists on our surviving papers. This means there are many fewer reporters to cover routine government meetings and breaking news, or produce the legislative and investigative pieces that save lives and our tax dollars, or hold our political leaders at all levels accountable. To understand the consequences of this loss in news, consider my hometown in rural eastern North Carolina. It's located in the 9th Congressional District, which is gerrymandered across 8 counties, some of the poorest in the state. For the past year, the residents of the 9th District have been deprived of a representative in Congress because of significant election fraud in 2018 that sailed under the radar of severely understaffed local and regional newspapers, as well as the state's broadcast and digital outlets. It was a political science professor at a small college 150 miles away, not a journalist, who first discovered the fraud. Very local news also goes unreported. A member of my local city council recently asked me, how do you correct a story on Facebook? As it turned out, no reporter showed up to cover an unexpectedly contentious council meeting. So the mayor's rather one-sided Facebook posting was the only account of what had occurred, and it had been shared hundreds of times. Historically, newspapers have been the prime, if not the sole source of reliable news and information for residents living in small and mid-sized communities, just like my hometown. But the business model that supported these local newspapers in the 20th century has collapsed, leaving startup and legacy news operations to reach for new models, for-profit, nonprofit, and perhaps even publicly funded, as they attempt to fill the void. Those local news organizations that survive and thrive in this digital age will be led by journalistic entrepreneurs who are creative and disciplined strategists, willing and able to invest for the long term. Abundant research and universities across the country have found that local journalism builds social cohesion, encourages political participation, and improves the business acumen and efficiency of local and state government. The loss of local news has significant political, social, and economic limitations and implications for our society and our democracy. Therefore, all of us in this room have a stake in whatever replaces the 20th century version of local print newspapers, including the venture capitalists who fund startups, the hedge funds, private equity managers, and financial groups that invest in and own our news organizations, the investment bankers who arrange the sales and mergers, the tech companies that disseminate our news and information, the directors of corporate foundations and nonprofit organizations who fund our local institutions, the educators who train our next generation of journalism leaders, and last but not least, my inspired and inspiring Knight-Bagehot colleagues. So my plea to all of you is please use your expertise to help a local news organization, perhaps in your own community, forge a sustainable business model. Thank you for this honor, and thank you for shining a spotlight on the vital importance of local news to the future of our democracy.